Welcome to Travel for Curious Minds, brought to you by Jules Verne. I'm Debbie, the Managing Director at Jules Verne. I'm really excited about this podcast. In each episode, we bring to you an amazing guest with some incredible stories inspiring you to travel the globe and unleash your curiosity for travel. So now, let's go over to your host, Abbey, and meet this episode's guest.
I am just delighted, really, to be sat here today talking to Phoebe Smith, podcaster, author, adventurer, just all-round adventurer, really, aren't you, Phoebe? So welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
This is really exciting because you've done a lot in your career, and I'm quite excited to kind of talk to you about everything, really. But first of all, let's start off with how you became sort of your podcast host and the author. Tell us about the book, your charity. Just plug yourself, Phoebe. Go for it.
Oh, that's always very difficult to do. So I'm known on social media as Phoebe Wonder Woman Smith, and I think that kind of sums up what I do. Like, I love to wander. I love to both wander as in walking, but also wonder as in wonder at the world. And I think I started out, I grew up in an area known by the national press as the Costa del Dole. So that gives you an indication for anyone who's in the UK of the kind of the prospects of people living where I did along the North Wales coast. And people just didn't not very much money in the area. People didn't go many places. The most adventurous person I knew was probably my grandmother, because in the Second World War, she'd been sent to Egypt, which is where she met my granddad, and they got married. And so I grew up, we holidayed in the UK. We didn't really do anything else other than that. So I never ever dreamed I would be an adventurer and someone who travelled for a living. It's kind of, everything's gone a bit crazy. But I think what started with me was that I was always very curious about the world, and I suddenly got this bug that I wanted to go out and see more of it. And so I got a job in a pub. After school, and I worked and saved my money and found out about visas that you could get to go and work overseas. So I ended up working in America. I worked in Canada for a year, Australia for a year. And what I would do is I'd work really hard for several months and save and save and save, and then just spend all that money on travel in that country. And a real turning point for me was in Australia, and I got a job on a backpacker magazine, writing travel stories, and starting to realise that you could actually get paid to write about travel, which absolutely blew my mind. And then they sent me on a assignment to go and camp in the Red Centre in the outback. And I had only camped once in my life before, despite growing up and having Snowdonia National Park sort of about 20 miles away. It was so far away, very difficult to access without transport. Didn't have the gear, didn't know what to do, that I just never had done it there. I'd camped once in my friend's back garden. She lived near a pub, so I remember we got terrified in the middle of the night when the pub chucked everyone out. And so I thought, yeah, do you know what? I will go do it, because I think when you travel, you get that traveller mindset, don't you, where you're prepared to push yourself and do the things that are beyond your comfort zone in a way that you don't tend to do in the UK or when you're back home in your home country. So I did it, and I remember before I climbed into my swag, which is essentially a rollaway bed with a tiny piece of fabric to keep you and the outdoors apart, the guide we had listed all the different creatures that could kill you. So he was talking about several deadly snakes, scorpions, even ants, that if they bit you enough times, they could kill you. And yet, despite that, I had such an incredible time, seeing the sunset on the rocks, hearing the animals come really close because they were no longer afraid because we'd become part of that environment, and seeing the stars come out, like I'd never seen anything quite like it. And then waking up in the morning and seeing the sunrise, and it felt like it was doing it just for you. And again, the birds would wake you up. It was the most incredible experience. And I remember thinking, if I'm prepared to do this here where so many things can kill you potentially? Why haven't I done it anywhere else? And so by the time I got back home, I made this pledge to myself to become a tourist in my own backyard. And it began with walks, which became long walks, which became overnight, which became wild camping, which is camping out of campsites, out on mountain tops, in the remote areas of Britain. And that's where I really became an adventurer and got this thirst for sleeping in strange places, challenging myself, going on really far walks, and then being able to share it with other people. Wrote several books about having adventures close to home, would write for the national press about going further overseas. And for me, it's all about the adventures, the stories, the people that you meet. And that led to, telling a story is what I love to do. And that led to obviously more books, my podcast, Wonder Woman, and just trying to just share this thing that we can all have adventures, we can all travel responsibly, and in doing so benefit the places that we go to. And that's really kind of what drives me now, is that knowing I can go somewhere and actually make a difference to the communities or the wildlife or the people on the ground and become a little bit of an ambassador for the place. Every single place I go, whether it's 10 miles up the road or 10,000 miles away, I just want to try and feel like my impact has been positive in some way.
And is there anywhere in particular that you feel really drawn to, that you feel like it has you've had that amazing impact, or it's just really kind of left an impression on your heart? Because you have been to a lot of places, and like you said, you've done things differently. You really try and explore wherever you are, whether it's 10 miles or 10,000 miles. So is there somewhere that really resonates you and has left a footprint on your heart?
There are so many places, and it often comes down to the people as well, I think, that you meet. I went to Chitwan National Park to do a story on the fact that you can see the Asiatic one-horned rhino out there, which the numbers had managed to go up because the military had got on board with anti-poaching units. And I went there to do that story, and it was a fantastic story and wonderful to hear how former poachers were now patrolmen and women, and it was wonderful. But one guy in particular stood out who had his own personal plight, which was vultures. Now, vultures within the culture were seen as being a dirty or an unclean animal that were unlucky if they landed on your house, And so therefore they were persecuted, and they're dying out, but they're really, really important. So what he did, he worked out a way to get tourists to come and watch them, because tourists love vultures because they're huge and it's amazing to watch. So he basically started up a place where he would take people's cows. Obviously, you can't kill cows in their culture because they're sacred animals. So he would look after people's cows that were dying, they were no longer producing, let them live out their life in a wonderful way. But then when they died, they would leave the carcass out for the vultures to come and peck clean, do what vultures do. He would have made sure none of the cows were fed antibiotics, so that was the main problem in Nepal. The antibiotics within the carcasses were killing the vultures. And so he could guarantee these were safe cows. And then tourists would pay to come and watch this amazing natural phenomenon. And it brought so much love and life into that village. And it meant that suddenly the vulture, which had been an unlucky symbol, was now something that local people proudly wore on T-shirts and hats and said they worked helping at this vulture place. And I think it's finding people that are so passionate about that can make a difference. And from experiences like that is where I decided, along with my teammate Dwayne Fields, who's a fellow adventurer, to found our charity, which was the We Too Foundation. And the idea from that is to work with disadvantaged young people from around Britain and take them on life-changing expeditions overseas so that they can understand the impact that they can have, the difference they can make in these places, but also learn things that they could do back home to help their own communities. And so we took a group of 10 to Antarctica in 2022 from across the UK and Northern Ireland. And we took them, and before they went, they had to pay it forward with good environmental good deeds in their communities. And did that. They did some incredible things. They did some litter pickings, they did some rewilding, tree planting, clothing swaps, everything to kind of attune them with the natural world and what they could do to help their own communities. Then we took them to Antarctica, where they helped scientists with data collection. They did citizen science themselves. And they saw the kind of relationship that even though you're, hundreds of thousands of miles away, things that happen in Antarctica affect them, and things that happen here affect Antarctica, and see that we're more connected than we'd ever think, and that global view. And then since then, they've gone on to give talks in their youth clubs, in their schools, to show that someone like them can make a difference and to inspire others. And we're about to take the next group to Galapagos to do a very similar thing. And that's what it is, because I'm a great believer in people, and that when you're passionate about something, you'll fight to protect it. And that's what we're trying to do, make more passionate people about the environment and community, to kind of plant that seed.
And I think I often ask people, how have your travel experiences changed you? And, how has it impacted your life? And it's true, your travel experience have impacted you. But with the foundation, you are impacting so many different people. And like you said, that outreach is going so far and communities are being built. Do you have any sort of moments that really stand out where you've taken someone away, or you've met someone away and they've kind of changed their life and other people's life off the back of their travel experience?
Definitely. All 10 of those young people from Antarctica have done something to help someone else, both before and after. One that comes to mind is a young lad called Malachi from North London, who, he got referred to us by a community sort of youth worker, because he basically got in trouble with the police. And they have an idea to try and get people back on the straight and narrow by supporting them rather than punishing them. He ended up doing wetland restoration work in North London, which was wonderful, and carried on doing it after the programme had finished. I remember seeing his face when we stood on Antarctic ground and he saw his first penguin. And I let him have a go of I have a DSLR camera, and I said, you have a go, you try and get that picture. And then when he came back, the difference in him, he could look people in the eye, he could hold a conversation with people he would have been too nervous to. And he actually decided off his own back to go back to his old school and give a talk. And then from that, he talked 3 young people out of joining gangs. And so to me, that just kind of showed, that's just one example, that there are so many, but that one kind of stood out as someone that, okay, we made a difference to his life, but now he's made a difference to 3 more people's lives. And then who knows what those 3 people will do. And it's a bit like that whole thing of throwing a stone in the water and seeing the ripple effect. We knew, both myself and Dwayne, as separate adventurers, we could do so much, both coming from the backgrounds we did that weren't your typical adventurers, weren't your typical kind of privileged background. We knew that we had an effect, but actually, how do you make more people listen? Well, it's by instilling that same passion and message of hope into as many people as possible. So the whole idea behind We Two is that eventually it will become, it started off as We Two, like we TWO, we 2 of us do something, but eventually we want it to become We Two, like we TOO, like everyone, because we really think everyone deserves to have those experiences and the change it makes in them. Kids going on to uni that they're first in their family to do it. We've had some get jobs because of the experiences they had. And it's just a great kind of way to give something back, I think.
Did that element of the charity and that mixture of travel surprise you? Or is that what you always thought from the moment that, you did your first wild camping experience and all of those things, you realised that travel could change you? Did it surprise you, the change that can kind of come out of these experiences?
I think that, from experience, I think when I first went on my first travel adventure, which was to the US to go and work, I basically went to California, had been promised a job. When I got there, it was a job on Santa Catalina Island. The job, I couldn't get hold of the people, the job didn't seem to exist. And I ended up having to find a job. I found a job on in a theme park, and then I moved again up to Seattle and found a job on a fun fair working with ex-convicts. It sounds horrendous in some ways, but it was really the making of me, that going to somewhere that was totally foreign. The US, yes, they speak English, but it's very different culturally. And having to kind of deal with a crisis on the ground myself and try and work my way through it, meeting all people I didn't know, getting to understand and learn how things work somewhere else. I know that I was a completely different person when I came back from that to the person who went on it. So I knew the power of travel already. I think when myself and Dwayne started the We2 Foundation, we both believed in it. And it had come from an idea. I was in the Maldives on assignment, doing basically surveying work with the Manta Trust, who look after manta rays out there. And they photograph them and they're identifying them and they're trying to build, obviously, a big picture of what the mantas are going through. And of course, the biggest threat to manta rays is from Asian medicine that says that their gill plates can filter, because the gill plates can filter things, which of course they do when they are on a live animal. They're held up as being, if we grind these down and put them in a powder and you take this medicine, you can avoid getting cancer, for instance. Nothing that's based in scientific fact. But so that's kind of the big threat. Anyway, I was on this group and it was a very nice trip, and everyone that was on it was definitely from a privileged background. And I mean, I certainly wouldn't have been able to afford it if I wasn't a travel writer. But I remember being there and we'd had these wonderful encounters with the manta and they barrel rolled right in front of us. And then a group of Chinese tourists came, and there were a lot of them. Some didn't know how to swim, and they were wearing life vests, and they all got in the water. And there was a woman on my trip who basically said they shouldn't be allowed to come. This is really awful. And I realised I had a totally different perspective on it. I was thinking, isn't this great? Like, actually, the impact of these 30 Chinese tourists who are now going to have the personal one-on-one encounter with a manta, they're probably all going to go back now and not buy something with the manta gills in, and they'll probably tell friends about this experience and share things on social media. So actually, their impact from being here was way more important than our impact from being there, from people who already know that you don't get something with manta plates in, and it just kind of made me think, God, not everyone thinks like me. Like, some people just think they shouldn't be allowed to be here in those numbers and all that, but I don't believe that feeling, that freeing nature, that and that global perspective and shift in your ideas that happens when you travel, I don't believe that should only be for the privileged few. And so when I met Dwayne and we started talking about our different backgrounds and different challenges we'd experienced in getting into travel and adventure, we realised, no, we want to give those people a chance that have these networks, that have people that can make a difference too. If you think of some of the most deprived areas as if they're going to know or take the time to learn about environmental challenges when they're not sure where their next meal is coming from, or they can't afford to buy a school uniform, or whatever that happens to be. And so by us taking them and saying, we're going to cover this, we're going to pay for this, you're going to have this experience, and then putting them back into their communities, we've that lesson is suddenly magnified between their peers. And and even though we knew that was going to happen, when we first met the first 10 young people and then took them away and then brought them back, even we had to admit how much they'd changed. We knew they were going to change, but it was almost instantaneous. We'd been away maybe 2.5, 3 weeks altogether, and you saw just how they held themselves, how they spoke to people. And now, we're still in touch with that first group. And they are completely different people. And our motto is planting seeds, not flags, which as an adventurer is quite a big thing. And we have definitely planted those seeds of hope and those seeds of positivity, we think, in those communities. And you get greedy for that. You just want to spread it around and do it for more and more people if you can.
I love it. It's amazing. It's such an amazing experience to be able to give people and be a part of. In all of your experiences in traveling and, the amazing things that you've done, has there been any destinations that have kind of surprised you, where you originally went there thinking, I have a view of what this is going to be like, and actually it's completely different, and you've walked away feeling incredibly surprised and elated?
Yeah, I've had it both ways. I've had places where I think I really want to go to and then I've been slightly disappointed. But I've also had that where maybe that I haven't had any opinion on what it would be like. I remember the first time I went to Galicia in Spain. Like, I'd almost been a bit snobby about Spain and sort of written it off as I thought I knew what it was and I didn't think it was the place for me. But actually going around Galicia and seeing, you know, that people are living in such a old way of life. You know, you have the pensioners out there with their hand-moved, like, ploughs, you know, tending to their crops and, you know, waving at you and trying to greet you when you walk through. The food is all very local. You know, they haven't had to do a campaign of a buzzword of, you know, be sustainable, be local. It just, that's how they live. And so I think, yeah, Spain is definitely one that surprised me and just made me get an appreciation for how big it is and how diverse it is there. Similarly, you know, a lot of people told me not to go to Haiti. Now, of course, they are going through some really, really difficult times. But when I went, it was a few years after they'd had the hurricane, and everyone said, don't go. And I'm telling you, the people I met there were the most friendliest, the most full of hope, the most creative. Like, you know, the art scene in Jacmel it blew my mind what they were doing. They were trying to engage street kids to get them involved with artworks and get them to be creating something positive and investing sort of in tourism. So that, you know, and I think anywhere where people say it might be slightly dangerous, are you sure you should go? They're often the places that kind of pique my interest and make me want to go back, because what you do find, you know, Russia is a great example. I've done the Trans-Siberian train. And everyone across Siberia and these were people that had virtually nothing. They were so welcoming and so friendly, would give you the shirt off their back. Do you know what I mean? And that's why now when I see what's happening obviously in Russia now, I do think of those people that I met in Siberia that are nothing like what we're seeing on the news, you know, who are really loving and giving people. And it just makes you realise that beyond the political headlines and everything, there are very real people there. And if you take the time to go and to know them and explore a place, you know, and get under the skin of the people as well, I think it's just, to me, that's what travel is all about.
And as you said, it is the people behind the places that make the experiences, isn't it? And
yeah.
For you and all of your travels that you've done, have you ever found yourself in a situation where things maybe haven't gone necessarily to plan and you have relied on complete strangers to help you? And
I think that's often the way. And I always tell people, like, if something bad happens, just remember that when things go wrong, it makes the best stories. No one wants to hear about everything going perfectly well. It's very, very dull. But yeah, for sure. I was in, of all places, I was in Tahiti, but as a backpacker, I didn't have very much money. And I'd got the ferry over to this island and had completely mistimed the buses about being able to get back for the ferry. And I was really, really panicking. And this woman just happened to walk past me and just kind of noticed I looked a bit distressed and asked me what was wrong. And I sort of, in my very bad pidgin French, tried to explain to her that I was going to miss my boat. And she got me in her car and she drove me all the way to the ferry, and I just made it on time to be able to get back, which was massive, because then if I hadn't have got it, I'd have missed the flight I had to get for the next place. And yeah, it just made me realise that, you know, most people in the world, most people are genuinely lovely and helpful and caring and want to do something to help you. And I think when something like that happens, that does something to you and makes you want to do that to someone else, help someone else when you see them struggling. And I often do try and help people myself now when I'm back home. You know, if I'm in London and I see people struggling around the tube or not knowing where to go, you know, I think it just opens your eyes a little bit to what someone else might be going through, that when you've had a problem and you think, well, I'm going to be their saviour now, I'm going to help them.
And although we can plan everything down to the last detail, not, you know, like you said, it doesn't always go right, but it does make the best stories. But talking about planning, how do you go around planning your trips, whether it be work or personal? Kind of what are your top tips for planning an adventure?
Oh my goodness. I think it's got to start with something you're interested in. Like I say, I'm not the kind of person who would say, maybe when I was younger, before I'd properly traveled, it would be like, I want to go to these places. But, as I've traveled more, I've realized actually it's like, okay, what do I want to experience? Do I want to go maybe see this particular wildlife species and see if there's a way I can give back while I'm there? Is it that I want to go and see this landscape and understand what it's like to live in that environment year round, maybe when the tourist season's gone away? Is it that I want to do a certain type of adventure? Do I want to do something where I can do a really good hike, or do I want to go sailing or kayaking, or, so I start with the passion, the thing that's going to make me want to go there. And then I'm looking for, first of all, how I get there. What's the most environmentally conscious way I can get there? Obviously, flying is still a huge carbon emitter, but so if there is another way, if I can go by train, for Europe now, I've always gone by train now if I can. If you have to fly, I'm like, okay, so there's the flight, but what can I do while I'm there that's going to make the difference? So I'm looking for, are there community run tourism projects I can go to? Is there a local guide that I can use? I'm very skeptical if people call themselves like an eco lodge. I do a little bit more digging, ask a few more questions. And then honestly, if all else fails, and I just want to put the planning over to someone else, I will contact a travel company and see what trips they offer, and look for a reputable travel company who's going to be able to do it and has all those same values that I do. So wanting to leave a place in a better position than when I arrived.
And how do you find travelling on your own, sort of whether it is both work or personal, doing these adventures kind of solo? Do you find it exhilarating? Did you first find it scary? Or, what are the feelings behind that for you?
Yeah, I think when you first start traveling solo, you if anyone says they're not scared the first time, I think they're lying, because you definitely are. It's, as it is when you do anything by yourself. I remember I used to be terrified of the idea of going into a restaurant and sitting and eating a meal on my own. I mean, now that's pretty much commonplace when I travel. I will be on my own doing it. I think you are scared at first, but I think in a way, that's the beauty of it, because that fear, if you can overcome that fear and book that trip and make you do it, what you get back is so much more in return, in terms of confidence building, in terms of when you travel on your own, you're open to conversations, to chance encounters, to meetings that if you travel with a friend or a loved one, you're kind of closed off to. And not only yourself, other people view you as being closed off, that they can't come up to you and start a conversation or ask you questions because you're in your own bubble. So it kind of breaks you out of that and forces you to be open and rely on other people. And I always say a good thing to do if you're wanting to travel on your own but aren't really sure how to do it is to go with, you can sign up as a solo traveler to a group trip. So you're kind of a solo person, but in a group, and that can really open your eyes to the fact that it's a great way to meet friends, to meet like-minded people, especially because you've all signed up for that same sort of trip. But I just say, it's one of those things. It can be terrifying, but the rewards will come back 100-fold of what you'll get out of doing it. So if you can just take that leap and do that first one, I swear that, I know people in relationships and couples who still travel on their own when they can, because they love that feeling and they love that chance to meet new people and make new friends. And it might be that, they like different kinds of holidays to their other half. And so they go off on their own separate trips and then come together and do one together. So, I think solo travel is wonderful. And I would definitely recommend people try it, even just once, just to realise that they can do it and there's nothing to be afraid of.
And where is next for you? What is the next sort of destination on the bucket list, or what is the next plan? Where are you going?
So Galapagos is next with my charity, the We2 Foundation. So we're heading off first to Quito and then over to Galapagos. And it was really important for us that we, obviously in Antarctica, there was no way we could really engage with local people because, of course, there are no local Antarcticans. But in the Galapagos, that's why we've decided to go for a land-based trip where we'll be using public ferries to get around, but we will be staying in local towns. And that's because we want the young people to engage with locals and kind of work out what kind of challenges they face there, what's it like to live there as a local and not a tourist. So that's kind of the next big one for me that I've that is consuming my whole life at the moment.
It sounds exciting. And as you said, being able to interact with the locals, the trip that you did to Antarctica was incredible, but this is going to give you, and the group that you're taking out there, a completely different perspective. And it's fantastic. Where can our listeners learn more about the foundation, more about you and the work you do, and just kind of stay in touch with you?
So the foundation, we're online at teamwe2.com. And so you can find everything out about the charity. Obviously on social media, I'm at Phoebe R. Smith and posting all my adventures and what I do there. If you want to really feel like you want to get to know me, my latest book is called Wayfarer, which is all about walking pilgrim paths as a non-religious person as a way of overcoming past trauma, and really kind of taking that time to connect the dots, I guess, with my own history and past, as well as doing the same within my country. And I think that's why I'm such an advocate of walking. I feel like walking in a place, you not only get to know the place better, but you get to know yourself better. So I think that's what I'd say. Yeah, go look me up, look the foundation up, definitely. And yeah, maybe pick up my book if you want a nice holiday read.
Take some time to get to know yourself and take some time out and read the book and just go on adventures is the best policy.
Definitely.
Phoebe, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed our conversation and hearing about the work that you do and the amazing experiences you have. And hopefully we can carry on following your adventures and your travels and hear more about your trip when you come back from the Galapagos too.
Yes, please do. And I should have said, do listen to my podcast as well, Wonder Woman, where you can, get a monthly dose of what it's like to go on one of my adventures and hear from amazing. I make a point of always interviewing amazing locals doing incredible work for their communities or for the environment or wildlife, the kind of unsung heroes that you wouldn't normally hear about.
It's an amazing podcast, an amazing way to shine a light on people that probably don't get the credit that they deserve in these destinations sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. That's certainly what I've tried to do.
Phoebe, thank you so much for your time today. And I really hope everyone listening has enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed having this conversation with you.
Oh, thank you.
I really hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as I did. We'd love to hear what you think. So please leave us a review on Apple or wherever you get your podcast. Or you can head over to our Facebook or Instagram accounts or our website, vjv.com. And don't forget, our episodes alternate between full-length conversations and short, sharp chats. So to make sure you don't miss out, subscribe now to get those episodes in your inbox as soon as they launch.